Tim, thank you for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Evan Spiegel, is he a competitor? Is he how do you view Snapchat?
I was talking to Evan backstage, and I'm a big Snapchat user, and was actually just with our executive team talking about it this morning. And the thing that I think Snapchat has done an amazing job of is it basically has taken media and turned it into an experience. And if you break down what I think might be the future trend in terms of what's going to happen in media, it's going to go from flat. Everybody's talking about virtual reality, but I think it's going to go from flat to a true integrated experience. And I used to work at ESPN. I love the ESPN brand, but Evan and Snapchat have reduced the amount of hours I spend with ESPN because the Snapchat Live product is so good. I'm a New England Patriots fan, is of basically being at the game. So instead of watching clips of a game, you can feel like you're at the game, and I think that
You do that instead of television, in addition to television?
If I don't get that much chance to watch TV, so for me, it's probably replaced television. Actually, overall, I don't watch a lot of TV. I watch sports, and sometimes I watch, things like Homeland or things like that. But in general, I don't watch a lot of TV. I would say if TV doesn't iterate and change, a product like Snapchat would reduce my overall TV time, and I don't have much to begin with, so I don't know if that's valuable or not.
So he's built this company to $15–20 billion in a very short period of time. But of course, then you remember that once upon a time, AOL was worth $150 billion. That was before you got there.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah. So is it a flash in the pan, or is it a platform that is going to continue to thrive and grow?
I think Snapchat is a platform when you talk to kids today and many adults now. So I would say it's a platform. I think it's turned into a platform. And, I'm somebody, I love seeing really smart, successful people and innovative people take tons of risk. And I think you have to hand it to Evan and his team. They've done a good job of taking that risk. And having been at a brand that went from 150 billion almost down to zero. I had two experiences. When I was at Google, we went from 0 to 150 billion, and then I went to AOL, which had gone from 150 billion almost down to 0. And
which was more fun?
I would say I learned a lot more at AOL overall, but AOL has been a more interesting experience overall. I love my time at Google. I was there for almost 10 years, but the innovation cycle that you see at a Snapchat or one of these other platforms and some of our brands also, that's the speed of business today and what you have to move at. And I think, every day has to be a risk-taking day at this point in any form of media because usage is changing. Mobile is going to change the way the world works.
So let's talk some more about AOL, because you took over in 2009. You tried a bunch of different things, local media patch. When did it first occur to you that the future for AOL would be to team up with a telephone company? I mean, the phone companies were, Steve Jobs used to refer to them as orifices. They weren't the favorite partner for anybody. What made you realize that was the way to go?
So we actually ended up with the Verizon deal. About 18 months before we did the Verizon deal, we started to look super deeply at the statistics at AOL every day, and we always look at them, but we kind of took a step back with our board and said, okay, let's freeze right now today, look at the growth from 2 or 3 years ago to where we are today, and we put together 5 verticals of things we had to be awesome at the future, and we basically spent 3 or 4 months kind of building out those verticals in terms of our strategy. And then second of all is we ranked.
What were the 5?
Number 1 was data. Overall, we can talk more about that. 2 was video.
Yep.
3 was mobile overall and mobile video. 4 was essentially open, which is having products and services that don't just rely on the people inside of your own company, but rely on people outside of the world. And the 5th one actually was about talent. And talent was about how do we get the world's most innovative people at the company on an ongoing basis and really unleash them. We call it unleashing talent, but how do we unleash those people?
Sorry about that. Keep going.
Yeah.
You were heading towards how you ended up with Verizon.
Oh yeah. So with Verizon, basically what we did is we stack ranked all the companies in the industry, offline, online, that we could basically work with to leverage our way into those 5 things. So we had that one page of 5 verticals I used to carry around with me every single day, and then I had a separate list of partners which had about 20 companies on it. And Facebook and Google at the time were the top 2 that basically had the most distribution power and horsepower, but Verizon was number 3 on that list. And Verizon was number 3 on that list because they offered incredible mobile distribution, incredible data. They were investing in video. And from where I sit, the phone is a machine. And I think if you think about a phone as a phone, you're missing the point. Just like the fire in the wheel hit planet Earth, every human being having a machine that can do 2-way content, you have to think that way, and Verizon has a lot of machines, 100 million floating around.
I want to go back to that in a minute, but I'm just curious, the list of companies on the right, any media companies on that list?
Yeah, there were media companies on the list.
But they didn't float to the top.
They didn't float to the top because they were, most of them were missing mobile in a serious way, and most of them were missing data in a serious way.
Okay.
And,
Yeah, so let's talk about that. I mean, Verizon obviously had mobile. It was mobile. But data, the key data they provide is geolocation, right?
Well, no, actually, the key data they have, which is all privacy protected, is essentially what happens on your phone. So if you're like we have apps at AOL, if we have an app on someone's phone, we get data from what happens from that one app. Verizon has data from all the apps and all the usage and location data, and basically, that leads in many different ways. As long as you do it in a way that is absolutely trustworthy with a consumer, or they're going to get a benefit out of it. It opens up a huge amount of avenues for us to start thinking about how we produce content, how do we produce apps, how do we work with other partners, how do we provide data for other partners.
Give me some examples. I mentioned geolocation because Verizon knows how I commute home from work in the evening. Right. They have that data, so they could offer me what you used to talk about with Patch. They could offer me a coupon to go to some restaurant or to the Walmart that I'm passing on my way home.
Well, here's in the short term, what you could do is offer people, instead of having to load stuff into your phone, you could proactively do things for them. So, for instance, on the data side, if you know a person has a certain propensity for a number of different types of apps, or they live in a certain location, you could auto-suggest apps for their phone overall. So right now, as a consumer, you have to go to the App Store and you have to go choose and find out what apps to put on your phone. Because we have that level of data, we have something called Digital Turbine, which we're testing right now, which will allow you to basically automatically put apps onto a phone.
But you also want to serve ads.
Yes.
That's where you've focused your energy.
Yeah, and ads, ads is another place that mobile is really important, because basically, human beings tend to do a lot of the same things over and over and over again overall. But looking through the data, you can also see when they do things differently. So, if you think about it, you can basically, if I'm on my phone and I'm looking at going to searching for AT&T and on an AT&T store locator, you could put up an ad for Verizon that says, hey, instead of going to the AT&T store, why don't you turn right and go to the Verizon store? And that's a Verizon specific example. But those are the types of things that are much more immersive and proactive over time.
Okay, but if I'm going to the AT&T store and my phone suddenly says, hey, why don't you take a left and go to the Verizon store, aren't we getting close to what Evan Spiegel just called creepy?
Yeah, well, it's creepy if it's not helpful, and he used some examples of stuff that would probably be creepy in general. But let's say, for instance, you and I were on a trip together, and we were going to go to the NBA All-Star game together, and we showed up in that city, and you and I both weren't from that city, didn't know anything about the city in general, and we popped up something that said, hey, Alan and Tim, here's the 10 best restaurants in the city. Hey, Alan and Tim, here's 2 museums that are open in the city right now overall. That becomes a proactive tool. I call this reverse commerce, but the people in general are used to basically searching for things, getting their cars to drive to things, those things. The machine that you have is so smart, and the network you'll be connected to is so smart, eventually you will be able to, without having to think about it, have many, many proactive suggestions in front of you that will be not annoying but helpful.
And how much of an obstacle are privacy rules going to be? Do you know yet? You say you're working through that. Those must be some of the issues that you're
working through. First of all, the Verizons of the world are much more under the privacy regulation and gun than the Silicon Valley companies are overall. Having worked at a big Silicon Valley company versus Verizon, Verizon is very careful about their data and information. I also think in the future, privacy is going to become a competitive weapon, meaning that if you step on the wrong side of privacy, I think you're going to get pushed out of consumers' lives pretty quickly, because I think more and more people are going to start using privacy and the tools around privacy as a benefit for consumers. So, as for us as a company, we've dealt with tons of data since I started at AOL. We've tried to be very careful in terms of using the data in a proactive, positive way for people.
So when are we going to start to see some of these products roll out?
From Verizon, from us?
That bring together the...
Yeah, we have them live right now with one partner running on the Digital Turbine product right now, and then we have a number of other products that we're coming out with as we speak. So basically, apps that are more location-based and suggestion-based overall, and then you'll see on the advertising business, we actually have a pretty differentiated advertising offering right now, which basically is a real-time mobile through video marketplace that's enabled with mobile data. So we're one of the only people in the industry that basically has at scale a massive video, massive mobile system, all connected directly to first-party data, from Verizon. So it's a big competitive advantage.
So you were very smart and very strategic about how you did this. You acquired a group of ad tech firms. You saw the possibility of a combination with mobile. I guess the question I have, and that a lot of people in this room have, is, what's the role of content in all of that? I mean, a lot of people said at the time that Verizon might just sell off Huffington Post. We don't need the content if we have the phone and we have the technology to deliver messages and ads.
He was talking about heart and science. I've been saying culture and code for 5 years at AOL, and I will say one thing. And I've been in Seattle working for Paul Allen. We launched ESPN.com 20 years ago. Was at Disney, have been at Google, have been at AOL. And I went to AOL because I knew we'd have a big chance in content overall. And this is the way I think about it in one sentence: is content is kryptonite for commoditization. Overall, and you can look through almost any technology solution over time and distribution solution, and they end up going back to having content, exclusive forms of content, and content experiences overall. And I think actually, in our standpoint, we partner with almost every company in Silicon Valley. We partner with everybody in LA. We partner with people in Europe, Asia. And the reason is because we bring a dual focus business of content and monetization. And the third leg now, too, is distribution on mobile.
But that's a very encouraging message that you're giving to this audience.
Most of the people in the technology business are trying to grow a brand.
Yep.
Okay? It's very easy to build an app. It's incredibly hard to build a brand. The brands that are represented in this room are incredibly powerful. And if you'll notice, most of the people from Silicon Valley end up coming to many of the brands in this room to try to get content, be around content. And I would ring the bell from a competitive positioning standpoint and leverage standpoint, that there's a lot of leverage in this room.
So you think, looking at the business of the people in this room, that you have a great brand, it's easier to build out the digital platform than to do the opposite, to have a great digital platform and try and build a media
brand. The people don't talk about this, but if you look at startup world, most startups fail. You hear Evan's story and other people's story, and those are amazing stories. But if I could give one piece of learnings from my landscape, that having grown up with in general, a real difference between the hugely established brands and the brands that are up and coming is the brands that are up and coming have nothing to lose. So they will try and at the established brands, you run into people who say, that's not what our brand does. Our brand doesn't do that. And by the way, there's some things your brand shouldn't do. And I'll give you a story from AOL. When I got to AOL, AOL had gone from #1 down to not #1 anymore. And when I would show up and say, hey guys, we got to take huge amount of risks. Like, let's go do this, and this. And basically people would not take any risk because they were trapped inside the AOL used to be #1, and we need to make ourselves look so, we do things like everybody else does our size. And so for a while when I first got there, I used to have this test where I would say yes to everything. I'd say, hey guys, let's go take a risk. And people say, oh, let's do this. And I say, yes, 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 yes. And I did that for a month, and basically no projects made it through. And I realized that, at a brand the size of AOL, even though it was losing, and they didn't want to change the game. Our team didn't want to change the game. And it took a cultural revolution there to do it, but it started from the ground up, and I have 20 examples of it, but those are the things that we're still working on every day.
So you're saying that if you have a great brand, the hard thing is the cultural revolution, to be willing to take risks, to do new things. But if you do that, you can win.
The competition is yourself, okay? Yeah. If you're in a really large brand and you're not making progress, you can look at Facebook and Snapchat and Twitter and everybody else in general. That's not your issue. Your issue is sitting right in your building, and that's a tough message, but that's the message we had to go at AOL. It's like the issue was not what Google was doing or what Facebook was doing, it's what AOL was doing, and we basically had to have a culture buster program, and that's kind of, we're still working on it.
So if media brands are so valuable, should we expect you to be buying more of them?
I would love to, and Verizon's a big investor with Go90 and a lot of media. Yep. You've seen us announce a whole bunch of media deals. I'm a very large fan of content and media brands overall, and if somebody in here wants to give us one, I would take one.
Show of hands.
Yeah,
anybody?
But no, I think brands are only going to get more valuable in the future.
What about Yahoo?
I think, I've been at my own rodeo, and by focusing on our own rodeo, we've been successful. So I wouldn't comment on Yahoo. I don't know anything you don't know about it overall.
But do you think the two brands make some sense together?
I won't comment on Yahoo. I think that we have 2020 goals as a business. So the same way I said we wrote down those 5 things in the partners, we have a new set of 5 things and a set of goals that we're going to with Verizon for 2020. And, we have that same list. Again, people that we should be working with to get there.
Who's on it?
I can't tell you that.
Come on.
I can't tell you that. But I'm actively, trying to pursue, and our team is trying to pursue all the organic stuff we can do, and also pursue all the partnerships that we can do.
How about the left-hand list, the key capabilities?
Capabilities. We've changed data into mobile data overall. And my personal take on this is, the internet was a volcano that ripped through many traditional models. Mobile is going to rip through the internet and rip through traditional.
So the transition from desktop to mobile is a bigger deal than the transition from print to desktop?
Much bigger, and it's going to get dramatically bigger over the next 3 to 4 years. We're going to have 2 to 3 more billion people getting online around the world. So I would say, I say this inside the company, I thought the internet was the biggest thing that was ever going to happen in my lifetime. Overall, I think mobile is going to dwarf the internet.
So mobile data.
Mobile video overall, which is critical, which is on our last list in general. Open has moved up the ranking, and what I mean by open is essentially if you can't interact with our product, if there's 8 people in a conference room trying to make 100 million people do something, it's not going to work in the future. I mean, you heard Evan talk a little bit about this, but essentially the brands that we have that are successful have all opened themselves up. If you look at TechCrunch, Autoblog, Makers is a Makers conference going on in LA right now. All these brands have opened themselves up for outside people. They've all grown traffic. They've all grown monetization. Overall, they've been successful. And the brands at AOL that haven't aren't. Period. Full stop. You can draw a line right in the sand overall. 4th is essentially, this one's a little controversial. It's putting consumer metrics on our content and advertising. So we're testing right now for consumers when they come to our content or advertising, putting proactive consumer metrics up saying this content's really good or this content stinks, or the ad's really good or the ad stinks. So the consumer, without even have to read anything or look at it, can get a good housekeeping seal of approval.
How are the advertisers going to feel about that?
They're not going to like it.
Crap.
No, they're not going to like it. And some of the things we're testing and doing they're really going to not like at all.
Well, how can you stick your finger in the eye of your advertisers?
Well, it's helping them actually, because if they keep doing what they're doing, like, some of our advertisers will put up one piece of creative and run it 20 million times. I mean, it doesn't help them.
To the distraction of the user.
To the distraction of the user. And look, the same thing's true. I've said this publicly before in TV. One of the things I did last year is I went through all the forms of media and I wrote down the same amount of times I had seen the same ad over and over again. TV, newspapers, print, online, those things. And consumers aren't stupid. They notice that overall, and I think it's it's really damaging to our sites and to our partner sites. We have 40,000 publishing partners that put up
your
ads.
idea is transparency.
Just transparency.
Let people see it.
Yes.
And let everybody.
And let everybody.
And they'll pull down those ads really quickly.
Yes.
And hopefully put something better.
Like one of the things I don't know if we'll do it or not, but one of the things I was going to do was put up the name of the person who created the ad on the bottom of the ad. Every time it ran, and our sales team went crazy on me, but I'm still working on that one. But it's if you think about it, what you want is you also want the people building the ads for you to take real pride in what they're doing, and really I think it's a signal to consumers you care also as a brand. Like Evan just said it, I think I couldn't really hear what he's saying when he was getting off, but I think he said that he doesn't let things on his site unless they're 10 times better than a normal experience. Imagine if you went to the ad community and say, I'm not going to put your ads up unless it's 10 times better. In many companies like an AOL or more traditional companies, it doesn't work.
When you were at CES a couple of weeks ago, you were talking about the human operating system. What did you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's highly likely in the near future that you'll have the same way you grew up having an operating system on your desktop where you had all your files and all those things, you'll have a human operating system in your life. And that human operating system in your life will touch, your car, your house.
This is a technology operating system for your life.
Yes, it's a technology operating system for your life, and it essentially will help you organize your entire life overall, and it'll be mobilely driven, and it will touch many, like the thing that's the next curve that I see coming in the content space. There's things like virtual reality, and which I think will be really impactful, but the biggest potential change I think is coming in Internet of Things, where you'll have many things in your life that you won't even be able to think about now. They're going to be connected, and those things, that data coming off that connection, will be like for your machine in your pocket, will be like gasoline for your car. It will make your life a lot faster, smoother, allow you to transport around, buy things more easily.
So Microsoft owned the operating system for the desktop, and Apple and Google own the operating system for mobile. Who's going to own the human operating system, as you call it?
I don't know yet, but I do know that I think one of the things that's been interesting is every time there's a platform shift like this, even if the companies own the original platform and it's going to shift to like a human operating system, the tentacles, when you build software starts like a seed, and it grows in the ground, has roots, and it goes above the surface so you can see it. Typically when these new platforms starts, it requires you to go all the way back down to the roots of what you originally planted, and it's a hard transition. So I think you're going to see a series of new companies evolve.
Somebody we haven't seen yet.
Maybe somebody you haven't seen yet, maybe one of the current players, but I think it's...
An Amazon?
I think, in my mind, Amazon is a company that is highly undervalued. And I think that you can make the opposite.
Because of that, because they have a shot at being that platform.
How many people in here have an Amazon Echo in their house? Has anyone got an Amazon Echo? So you like yours?
Yeah.
Yes. So Amazon Echo is a product that you talk to. It basically looks like a cylinder. It's kind of like a Bluetooth speaker. But that's an example where you can order goods and services with your voice right off the Echo. Overall, it sits in your house. It can hear what's going on in your house.
Could be the beginning of a new ecosystem.
Could be. So those are the type of companies I think that are thinking that in the future. And I would just say from a brand standpoint, it's a hard landscape. You look at things like Snapchat or what Facebook's doing or Twitter, Discover, those things, and it feels exhausting, but it hasn't even started yet, I hate to tell you. It's like the next generation is going to be even bigger.
You have to move fast.
You got to move fast.
Can we just talk for a minute about ad blockers?
Sure.
Do you see this as a big threat to the business you're in, the business we're in?
Yeah, I think it's a threat if you keep behaving the same way you're behaving. Ad blockers came up because ads are really poorly done on the internet, and consumers have been disrespected to a large degree. So that's, I think some of the stuff I was talking about earlier in terms of putting more quality metrics on ads. I think there's very few signals in the world to consumers that the ads that are on a site were actually filtered for what the quality was for the consumers, and that has naturally grown into the ad blocking phenomenon. So, the thought process of blocking the ad blockers, that's some people's strategy that may work. I think it's more attuned to basically think about this as a direct signal from consumers that we're doing a really bad job with ads, and that we should be doing much more innovation in terms of how ads get served to consumers.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, I think that one of the things, like, how many times has anyone ever asked you what brands you like a publisher? Have you ever been asked what brands you like?
Sometimes.
Okay. Has anyone ever asked you if you're going to buy a car?
No.
No.
They just assume.
So people assume that you're going to buy a car, and they assume I'm going to buy a car. The reality is, it may be worthwhile for an advertiser to pay you to tell you. Like, it may be worth $10 for me if I say, can I pay you $10 if you answer a question for me? And you say yes. I say, you're going to buy a car? You say yes. Then basically what kind of car brands you like. You tell me what car brands you like. There's things that can be done that would be much more beneficial for consumers than what's currently happening.
And where you're basically opting in and you're getting some benefit from your own data.
Yes. By the way, just because advertising's worked the same way it's worked for 150 years or whenever Wanamaker started doing ads 100 years ago, it doesn't mean it's going to work that way in the future. And I think one of the things that we're under leveraging right now is more interactive. That open idea I talked about, there's, advertisers are generally afraid of asking consumers what they want or what they think. And, I did this example. I brought this up at our company a couple of years ago, and I was in a conference room and people were pushing back saying, I don't think that's the case. And I said, how many consumers have we had in a room inside our own company while we're planning ad campaigns? They said, what are you talking about? I said, well, why don't you go get 50 consumers and let them plan the campaign with us? They said, well, we don't do that. I said, well, that's our problem. Let's think differently about how we do these things, and that's kind of what we're going through right now as a company.
So you were running your own show. Now you're part of this big telephone company. How long are you going to do that?
Well, I basically committed publicly to be around for 3 to 4 years overall with Verizon, but I also gave my word to the CEO, Lowell McAdam, that I would stay as long as I'm useful overall.
You're going to be useful for a long, long time.
Well, that's in the eye of the beholder. So I would say, I think from where I sit, I've been doing this my whole career. I'm really interested in seeing what happens with media in the future for mobile, and really excited about what we're doing. It's genuine excitement overall. So, I don't have any plans to do anything else, and I think a lot of the stuff that it's given us a chance to take a lot more risk. I'd say, one of the experiences I had at AOL is when you're in a public company every quarter trying to do things and trying to turn a company around in the spotlight, that was a challenging experience. And now I would say I probably got 40% of my time back just to focus on some of the stuff we've been talking about, here, and that's a huge benefit.
You talked very compellingly about the sort of organic growth of this human operating system. That's going to be decades, right?
Right. Yeah. There's certain time periods. I think back in when I went to AOL and maybe a couple of years in AOL, I was kind of looking forward, saying, the current path I can kind of see maybe 7 to 10 years. I think what we can see now, there's probably easily 20 to 30 years of growth in front of us, and it hasn't even hit yet, it hasn't even started, and I think it's going to be bigger than the internet was. So I've been doing internet stuff for 20 years. I can't imagine the next thing's not going to be 3-4 times the size, and 20, 30 years of development overall. I think it's going to be really massive, massive.
We have time to take one quick question from the audience. If we can get a microphone over here very quickly, please. I don't know where the mics are. You want to stand up and shout?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Tim. All right. How are you doing?
My question is about the growth of mobile, which is incredibly exciting. But there's a downside to it as well. Every time you drive on a highway and you see people driving and looking at their mobile device at the same time. Now that you're part of Verizon, is there anything they can do technologically to prevent all of the tragedies that do
the answer to that has to be yes.
Yeah. So there's, by the way, there's a tremendous amount of work going on this at Verizon and all the other wireless companies, basically to put safety inside of those, inside of the vehicles, inside of the phone systems around that. So there's a technological solution. I'd also say there's a massive investment in education. And if you were riding around with kids 5 years ago, you've probably seen this. If you have kids, they didn't really think about whether or not you were texting or had your phone out. Today, you pull your phone out while you're in the car with the kids, and they're, it's smoking, now. And so I think that they really care about it. Also, Ari and I used to work together at Snowball.com, actually, which is really interesting. One of the properties there was IGN, and I was just looking at Snapchat before we came up on the stage. I was showing Alan some stuff, and IGN is a brand. Talk about a brand. That's a brand that almost went out of business years ago, and now is one of the 15 brands on Snapchat overall, and they were kind of in a room like this one day and decided, I guess, to make a real big push.
But it's not a place you want to be when you're driving a car.
Right. No, not at all. Not at all.
And there's really no reason why your phone, I have lots of apps that won't let me do anything while the car's moving.
Yeah, so the other thing, if you look at what's happening, if I don't know how people here have Tesla cars or other types of more of the high-tech cars are changing a lot. And then the other thing I think is a huge benefit is I think things like Uber and other things taking off are, the types of people who would drive and text, there's probably going to be few of those people on the road also.
So I have to ask you this because it's the day of the Iowa caucuses, and once upon a time, people used to talk about Tim Armstrong running for office someday. Any interest at all?
So somebody started that rumor like a bunch of years ago, and I've denied it vehemently every time. But here's what I'm rooting for in politics. Since we own the Huffington Post and TechCrunch and other brands that cover the politics, I'm hoping for the longest, drawn-out political presidential campaign of all time.
You won big.
And everyone who is Donald Trump-esque jumps into the campaign, and we run it, and everyone ties, and then we go on for a second election and a third election and a recount and hanging chads. That's what I'm voting for. Thanks.
That was great.